What's up, Baylor family? It's Grayson Grundhoefer, along with Colt, Barber, and myself. We're excited to bring you a new season for the 2024-2025 Baylor Athletics season. We are both with Sick 365. We're alongside you this entire athletic season. We are super pumped. We recently launched a partnership with Baylor Plus. Now we're hosting Inside Baylor Sports. Grayson, I know you're excited. I'm excited. We do this all the time. Now we're getting to do it for Baylor entirely. For your daily podcast. So Grayson, how's it going, man? How was your Sunday? How was your kind of your last day off ramping up to this thing?
I mean, it's great. I mean, this is one of those things where we started the Bearcast originally Fast Friday, like, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. And, been doing that podcast for a long time. And now, getting the opportunity to do something every day, it's going to be really cool. And, Colt, you and I have never, done a podcast, long-standing podcast. We've done a few here and there, but this is so different and something that's going to be really cool and very unique. And of course, like you mentioned, our partnership with Baylor Plus is going to be something really special and something that we're going to continue to build through for sure.
Yeah. So Grayson and I have worked together for 7 years, 8 years. Grayson started with us as an intern. So our phone calls are now transitioning to podcast form. No hour and a half is going to be about 20, 25, 30 minutes at tops, bring you all types of news. So information, discussion, guests, every single sport, not just football, not just basketball, but every sport we want to cover. We're going to make sure to supplement that with great guests. And we're pumped to do it. And so first, just to kind of dive in here, just to get us started, I want to talk about the Olympics, which is, every 4-year deal, super popular. United States just basically won the medal challenge, whatever they call it. And there's 4 Bears who were able to bring home medals. Well, John Pierce, gold medal with tennis, which is really cool. I guess that was doubles tennis. Brittany Griner, women's basketball, won a gold medal. Avery Skinner with volleyball won a silver medal. And Chrissy Wallace, women's basketball, actually lost to Brittany Griner she's with Australia, but she did win a medal. So she didn't really count to the United States medals, but she got a bronze medal, which is really cool. Grayson, I mean, I know you're a tennis guy. I know you love tennis as well. So what's your initial thoughts on John Pierce winning that medal for the United States and then obviously Baylor?
Well, that was super cool. And also it was cool to track other Baylor Bears in that event as well. There were a few other ones too. Yeah. And so you kind of got to see the bracket unfold. And, John Pierce obviously winning it is spectacular. I mean, to win it in Olympic gold is something really special. And winning it in doubles, I'm sure, is also really cool because you have a partner with you. And, right. And it's kind of that whole camaraderie and building experience. And so that was great. I love seeing that. I actually watched the women's basketball game today. That was, wow. I did not expect it to be an actual close game because the women's basketball team has been so dominant. But they got everything they wanted from France. So that was cool to see. Brittany played a little bit. Obviously, she's more of a rotational player on that team because of Asia Wilson, but still got some minutes, played well. And you mentioned Christy Wallace. That was great. She was kind of a surprising one, I would say, as far as just kind of popping on the radar that she made the Australia team. Not because she wasn't a great basketball player, just kind of one that was, I feel like, a little off the radar. And then, of course, Avery Skinner with, women's volleyball winning a silver. That was great, too. And that, U.S. women's volleyball continuing to really, make strides. They're doing really well. I believe they won gold in Tokyo and now winning silver here, which is great to see.
Yeah, so those were not the only former Bears that played. There's several, and I don't even have the list in front of me to go over, but it's really cool. I mean, it gives you a different perspective, right, on watching the Olympics as a Baylor fan, or I guess truly any collegiate athletics, fan of any program can watch for their former athletes. So, but for me, it was just cool seeing those names pop up and discuss them, one on Sikkim 365, but just have them internally to think about and know about. So, anyways, I want to jump in there, but we're going to talk about football, but Baylor just came off a pretty big offseason, so to speak, with basketball, both of their basketball programs. And so Scott Drew, I mean, there's been a lot of times when you think about job openings with Scott Drew, right? But there's only a few that you're ever really concerned about. But one of them was always Kentucky. What would happen with Kentucky if it ever opened up? Because it's the traditional power. I mean, it's kind of the brand in basketball. Regardless if they're winning at the time, they're always the brand. And Mac Rhodes kept him. He kept him in Waco, man. I don't know if it was the Mexican food restaurant or not, but what's your thoughts on that for a Baylor program which has had high success, but doesn't necessarily have that household name that Kentucky is growing, but it's not always been there. What's your thoughts on that? Just, Mac Rhodes, Baylor being able to keep a guy like that, keep Scott Drew.
I mean, first of all, the whole just kind of saga was extraordinary. The fact that Louisville wanted him first. And so you kind of saw, quote unquote, little brother. Yeah. Little brother's trying to get him. And then Kentucky comes in right after. And you're just like, oh my gosh, is Baylor really going to be able to make this work and really, kind of weather these two storms? But I really think they've just made Scott Drew just such a focus and priority for them for so long. Like Mac Rhodes has really done a great job of that. I mean, the new stadium with the Foster Pavilion, which obviously just, really opened fully a few weeks ago, which is great. That's another momentum builder. Recruiting is probably at a level that I would say it's never been at, even though they had success in the past. But the resources are there, the facilities are there, and honestly, the motivation to win in men's basketball from Scott Drew on up to the top, it has been a focal point. And I mean, you're seeing it in the Big 12 as well with Brett Yormark. I mean, what conference would you want to be in that's better at men's basketball than the Big 12 right now? I mean, that's just kind of where it is. So, I mean, it's amazing that Mac Rhodes is able to keep someone like Scott Drew, who in my eyes is a surefire top 10 coach. You could argue a top 5 coach in the sport. And to keep him from Kentucky, that's special. And that's the reason why Mac Rhodes has been such a successful athletic director, in my opinion. He's had some moves that I feel like have been rather underrated, but this one definitely not. Everyone recognized it when it happened.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the credibility that it brings for, I wouldn't just say the Baylor basketball program. I think the entire athletic program of like, holy cow, like they were able to hold on to him. And I think you start speaking to NIL and the transfers that they've had for basketball. Let's talk about that transfer class a little bit, because I'm not a huge basketball guy, but I'm watching, I'm keeping up with it, right? And you have the transfer class for one. I don't know, the speculation, rumors of how much were paid for players, whatever, but they got them. I mean, at the end of the day, they got those guys, and they're here. So being someone that keeps up with basketball a little bit more, I want you to tell me about these transfers. I know that I think they've both been on Baylor Plus at this point, but I want you to tell me a little bit about your knowledge of them. And just what they bring to this particular team and what they meant for Scott Drew coming off of, I guess he kept them, signed them after he turned down Kentucky. So, I mean, it's just a domino effect to land 2 guys like he did.
Right. And I mean, Jeremy Roach's recruitment was the start of Bags U, right? That's where that slogan came from. And so I found it to be, one of the more fascinating recruitments, because you kind of heard speculation about it before it even happened, which was kind of interesting, I think, from our perspective. And so he ends up entering the transfer portal. And for obvious reasons, they have Proctor coming back, and Duke's recruiting class is absolutely absurd this year. So the playing time, he was going to start for them, but there was going to be some issues with him playing point guard full time, which is what he wants to do, which is what he's going to get the chance to do at Baylor. I just think he's the perfect fit. Like from a cultural perspective, I mean, everything I've heard so far, it's like one of those things where guards bring the ball up the court and they hate bringing the ball up the court against Jeremy Roach, because it's not so much he's the athletic freak that Davion Mitchell was or that kind of presence, but he's so strong and so old. And it's just one of those things where he gets up in you and it's hard to move him and hard to get around him. So defensively, I'm really excited about that. I think he's going to be somewhere around the range of James Akinjo on the defensive end. And then you look at the offensive side of the ball. I don't think he's the passer that Akinjo was, but I think he's a much better scorer and plays with better pace, I think, than Akinjo did at times. So I'm really excited about him. I think his strength at the guard position, at the point guard position, is something Baylor has kind of been lacking. I think since James Akinjo, just kind of that mindset of, I'm going to take care of the basketball. I'm going to go through contact. All of those things are really important. And I just think it helps with kind of the culture of your program and what you're trying to instill.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you had a player comparison to him, former Baylor player, is there anyone that you liken him to, or is it just like, hey, this is a unique guy? I mean, he's played at the top of the level, top of college basketball for 4 years, their 3 or 4 years, however long it's been. And is there anyone you compare him to that you liken him to whenever you watch him?
That's a really good question, because it's hard, because like I said, he is kind of like a Kenjo, but he's more of a combo guard than a true point guard, just the way that I look at it. Like a Kenjo's ability to make pocket passes or something a little different than what Roach brings to the table. But Roach is a scorer, and the physicality. And then also, like, Colt, this guy's been in the NCAA tournament, won a ton of games in the NCAA tournament. Like, he's seasoned. He's a veteran. He's won a lot of games. And so I don't know that there's a direct comparison, to be honest, because, I mean, you're looking at, I think Akinjo's the closest, but again, probably a better scorer, not quite the passer, but brings that same mindset and defensive ability and leadership, honestly, to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at the big, tell me a little bit about Norchad and what he can bring. I mean, he's just a dude, like, I'm a football guy, so I'm like looking at, like, is he another tight end, right? Like, is he someone that, I think the Baylor fans are going to love his energy and the way that he plays. But tell me a little bit about him and what he can bring that maybe Baylor hasn't really had in the post. I mean, they've had some good players, but he just seems a little bit different than what they've had in the last few years.
Right. He's very different as far as the way he plays compared to the post that Baylor's had in the past. But my goodness, I mean, he's been a double-double since his freshman year of college. I mean, every single year, a double-double machine. And I think that part of it's huge. His defense is going to remind people so much of Mark Vidal, like so much. It's so similar. I think he probably Mark was so solid positionally, and Mark also took his chances with block shots. And I think you're going to see that with Norchad too, just that relentless, try to block everything type mindset. He's going to bring that to the table. As far as the offensive side, it's interesting. He's really good driving to the basket. I really enjoy watching him catch the ball from the top of the key and then go one-on-one and get to the rim. Kind of like, honestly, like what Yves Misi did at times last year for Baylor, attacking. Once he got more comfortable, he's a young guy. It took him some time, but Norchad has that. And then also Norchad has, 34% from three, including his best 3-point shooting shot, the top of the key. And so there is something to that. If you're going to leave him wide open and not come up and pressure him, I actually think he might be able to make like a 3 a game or something along those lines.
So a little bit different than Mark Vidal. Yeah. So a little bit different than Mark Vidal in that way. And
on the offensive end, they're not comparable.
Yeah,
they're not comparable on the offensive end. Like Norchad's much more advanced than Mark ever was.
So you have the energy, of Mark, the defensive tenacity, the strength, physicality, but then on the offensive end, you can rely on him to step outside, hit some shots. So, I mean, it sounds like a match made for Scott Drew in the way that he likes to play a little bit with his post. And I'm excited to see. So overall, briefly, we got to move along here, but I mean, I feel like this team's a team that potentially, with the pieces it has, some freshmen that are coming in, it feels like a team that could make a run. I would say probably top to bottom, one of Scott's deeper teams since we've seen since the national championship team.
Definitely. And, I do want to mention really quick, they also added Cal transfer Jalen Celestine, who another underrated addition, but a 41% 3-point shooter. I mean, everything I've heard is the shooting is as advertised.
And he's what class is he? What class is he now?
He's got 2 years of eligibility. And last year was his first year coming back from a knee injury. So he was still kind of getting back and made 41% of his threes. So very good player. He's going to replace Jalen Bridges in many ways. But you're exactly right. The depth of this team, the youth, which it's like this youth mixed with veteran experience type team that if you get it all to come together, you feel really good about it. I mean, when Langston Love is probably going to still be your 6th man, you got a really good team. And so, I'm really excited about that. And BJ,
hoping we can make some more of these shirts for that year. I mean, that was a crazy year. And I think every single Baylor fan is looking for that to be replicated. You want the follow-up, you want the encore. So switching gears a little bit to basketball, Nicki Collen signs an extension. I think that's helped her recruiting. It's going to stabilize that program. They come off a great year, and to be able to sign an extension, I think that she's here for as long as she's welcome. She seems like she loves Baylor. She has great talent. She's only going to recruit better and better the more that they win. So initial thoughts on that extension? What do you think that brings to that women's program? And what are your overall expectations for that team, moving into this winter?
Right. I feel like this one was kind of more of a bet. You know what I mean? More of a bet on the
Sure.
trend. And so, they went 26-8 this year, and you could see the improvements, because the year before they were 20-13. They really weren't that good a couple years ago. But last year, like, they were a good team. They had some really good wins on their resume. And then, once they got to the tournament, they won a few games. They pushed USC really far in that Sweet 16 game. I think you could argue they should have won that game.
Should have. Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. And so you talk about all that and you go, okay, you finally are seeing, I think, Nicki Collen's brand of basketball. I don't know that we necessarily saw that the first 2 years, because you're kind of working with someone else's players. You're not necessarily developing. So last year, I think you finally saw the culmination of a lot of her players, a lot of the girls that she developed, really taking that leap. And so, yeah, I was very impressed. And I think it's a bet on that continuing. I think that's what that is. And that's great for Nicki Collen, because I do think women's basketball still has all the potential in the world to be very dominant.
Yeah. I mean, throwing the new facilities for both sides, they're both getting access to that. I mean, they both have winning traditions. Basketball, I mean, it's only looking up. I mean, you can say that it's kind of peaked, but I don't think it's peaked. I mean, you throw in the Foster Pavilion, the NIL aspect, it seems like they're doing great in the transfer portal and recruiting. I think that the higher end is still yet to be met for both of those programs. So, all right. So dude, here we are. It's football season, right? We've been talking basketball, but it's really football season. Like, my son and I went to fall camp practice. I was able to take my 7-year-old. The coaches in Brent Ingram allowed me to take him, and we were only there for 20 minutes on Saturday, but man, it just got my juices flowing. And, but it's football month. Actually, August is usually not football month, but it is football month, with the first game being on August 31st. So, I mean, what are you thinking right now? It's such a unique year. Like, it's, there's, depending on which way it goes, what we're looking at in the next 6 months, what all can change. But, how are you feeling? What are you thinking right now?
I mean, we talk about this a lot, but just how much change has just happened in this Baylor program in, 8 months is really kind of absurd, and not really something you see that often unless there's an entire coaching change. And that's not what we saw. You saw pieces of a staff, leave and pieces change. But then you saw a completely different NIL approach. You saw a completely different approach to how you're going to win football games, with Dave Aranda basically deciding, hey, you know what? I'm going to be the defense coordinator because, this season I need it to be about winning. No, it's a great thing. I mean, you got Jake Spavital and you got Dave Aranda as your coordinators. And that is a really, really good duo right there. And so, I just think it's a season of change and a season of uncertainty, but also a season of momentum where you're seeing a program that is kind of just now adapting to the current landscape of college football. And so now you're seeing a potential path for them to, hey, if they go out and win this year, now you actually have something to build on. And I think that's the biggest thing, whether you look at recruiting or the transfer portal or player retention through NIL. They've made a huge jump in that. And I think it's just going to do great things for them as long as they're able to win football games, which is what it's going to come down to, honestly.
Yeah, it is. And, I think what's transcended from what they have done is that whoever the coach is in any sport, NIL is going to lead the way. And I think that can't be overstated. Like, it's whatever happens with any of these programs, there's a foundation with GXG. And I want to talk about that, where they are. And it didn't just start here recently with high school recruiting. Like, this started back in November, December with NIL. And you start talking about Daquan Finn and just the list. I mean, there's 20. I think there's 20 guys, 15 guys, plus junior college that they brought in that they said, okay, we're going to approach this in a much different way. Now they're all on campus. I think there's one outstanding that's not on campus as far as today goes. But, I mean, it's completely changed the game. And I think it's a major asset for whoever the head coach is. Dave Aranda has used it perfectly this fall, or since last year leading up to this fall. And so let's talk about that. We pay players. I mean, dude, it's trending. There's no way around it. Like, they're wearing T-shirts. Dave Aranda addresses it in his media session yesterday. Like, it's no one is not talking about it anymore. And I think for the previous year, no one wanted to talk about it. And I don't know necessarily that it was because it was a bad thing. It just wasn't being discussed because of the way that they were approaching it. But now here we are. They're right in the middle of it. They're getting high school commitments that are, major players against everyone. They're signing transfer portal prospects that have offers from everyone in the country. They're signing junior college at every level that they're doing it. And like you mentioned, this immediately gave them an opportunity to compete this year. And that's the difference between college football now and college football 5 years ago, is that there was no immediate overturn. I mean, we can rag on programs that, flip 50 scholarships in a year, but reality is that's possible, and you can completely change your fortunes in one offseason.
Right. And we've actually talked about this a little bit on Sikkim 365. I went through and kind of looked at, okay, so how realistic is that Baylor can go from, a 3-9 team to a bowl team? And it's like, that is beyond a doubt realistic based on what we've seen over the past few years. There's usually like 5 or 6 teams that flip their trends from the year before and win like 4 more games or lose 4 more games than they did the year before. And honestly, before the transfer portal and before all, the NIL stuff. So in the last 2 years, it's become way more common for that to happen. And it's because, just like you said, schools are changing their approach, trying to figure out what the right approach is. If they have a bad year, trying to figure out what went wrong, and just trying to adapt. And that's what Baylor did this offseason. So now it truly is going to come down to, can this staff put a product on the field that is going to win football games? Because they have everything set for them now, roster wise, to go out and win games and flip things around from what we saw a year ago.
Yeah, so I'm going to go out of order a little bit here, because we were going to talk about the new faces for personnel, but it starts with the coaching changes. And we talk about Jake Spavital, offensive coordinator. We talk about Dave Aranda, now the defensive coordinator. But on offense, what's fascinating to me is that with the transfer portal, you can bring in a new offensive coordinator. And whereas 5 years ago, you're thinking, well, we got to recruit to this now. Now we got to go out and sign players to change. So the path to changing offenses is such a drastic difference. But now you're going out and you can almost sign an entire starting offensive lineup from the portal and completely feed into the scheme that you're about to run. And I think Baylor's done a great job of that with Jake Spavital. So let's talk about the offense a little bit, and then we'll get into the personnel. This is a spread offense. I mean, if Baylor fans liked what they ran under Art Briles from 2008, 2015, is going to be very similar as long as the personnel can match what Jake Spavital. I mean, he's on record saying that he wants this offense to be like Art Briles' offense more than ever. And so we are about to see what he is capable of doing with the transfer portal and plugging and playing. Talk about, what would you say Jake Spavital brings that can take this season and make it right for Dave Aranda his first year?
Well, I think they're finally going to be explosive more consistently on offense. I mean, it just simply put, the past few years, it was either you were going to be able to run the ball successfully and then hit on play action shots, or you were kind of going to be in trouble. And so I think for this offense, at least, you're going to play fast. You're going to play up tempo. You're going to be more exciting. I think a little more creative, a little more inventive, instead of, running the football and running the football and running the football. Like, they're going to change these things up. They're going to use the screen game a lot more than they did in the previous staff, the previous OC as well. So I'm excited about that. I think you're going to see a lot more shots downfield than I think people realize. I think they're going to allow their receivers to have a lot more one-on-one chances, which this offseason, they've talked a lot about that with the receivers, contested catches. It's been a reoccurring theme that has been brought up multiple times by coaches, players. Ketron Jackson mentioned it multiple times as a guy. He needs to get more consistent at that, and he does. As we saw from last year, they brought in Ashton Hawkins, who's going to kind of be a guy that they're going to rely on in one-on-one situations as well. Monterey Baldwin. So a lot of guys like that. And then in the run game, the priority is not having negative plays. It's being ahead of the chains, which we saw last year. That costs Baylor so dearly at times, seeing there at 2nd and 14 and it feeling completely hopeless.
Yeah. So I think that you mentioned Ashton Hawkins. What's another new face? Give me one new guy and one old guy and I'll give you mine after you give me yours, but that can kind of change the potential of this season on both the guy that's coming back, either side of the ball, guy that's coming in either side of the ball. What's your opinion on someone that can help change pretty quick, because they're going to need some change pretty quick?
Right. So, I think on the defensive side, I think there's been a few reoccurring names, but I'm going to roll with Carl Williams. I just think there's something about him returning and something about the way that everyone has talked about him and the fact that he was at Big 12 Media Days, which is very rare.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
I was not expecting him to be there at all. As a
No.
sophomore, second-year
No.
sophomore, not a huge it's not Cade Jenkins. Everybody knows who he is,
Right.
but he's there. So it tells you something about him.
I felt like we should have probably made a bigger deal about that, and maybe we just didn't. We just didn't do that, and I mean, it was cool, and it was just like, oh, okay, that's great. They really like Carl.
He's good with
awesome.
the media.
Yeah, great. But now it's like, oh no, this guy is like the best safety on the roster right now, and a guy who's going to be a true difference maker in their secondary, and the expectations are very high for him, and you can tell his expectations for himself are very high. So he'd be a returning guy on the defensive side that I'm really excited about.
Returning guy, still young,
sophomore. Right. Yeah. And then on the offensive side, I mentioned Ashton Hawkins, and I think it is him. I truly do. I know that there's some other guys that you could talk about upside wise for sure that you might mention, but I think with Ashton Hawkins, it's just he's worked with Jake Spavital before. He's had success in his offense before. Spavital knows exactly what he can do, what he's good at, the situations that he wants to put him in. And I just think Ashton Hawkins is an absolute just, monster. Like when we've gotten to see him in person, I mean, he is beating cornerbacks one-on-one relentlessly and then also talking about it, which I really like. I respect that. That brings you more back to, what we saw, with Art Browse, where guys played with an edge. Ashton Hawkins plays with an edge, and that's really important, I think, for a group like wide receivers. Like, you need to think that you're the best player on the field when you play wide receiver.
Yeah. Okay. So I like where you're going with that, because you took both of mine. And so now I'm going to flip it. And I did fortunately have some more. So I'm going with someone that's going to tell you about it on the defensive side of the ball. And that's Lorando Johnson-Snacks. And interesting backstory with him being at Baylor, leaving, coming back. I think it speaks to what Dave Aranda is doing with the program and the direction that he wanted to come back from Arkansas. I mean, he's a starter, multi-year starter at college football. Now he's coming in, he's going to probably play cornerback. I just like the edge. If you talk to guys in media sessions about him and you ask him, dude, he's just that guy in terms of he's going to motivate his teammates. But he's also has the experience to play. He's one of the fastest players on the team. I think top 2 with Monterey, which is nuts to think about as a cornerback. You don't see it as much as you would with a ball carrier, but he can fly. And he's going to tell you about it. And I think he brings a little bit of an edge to the defensive side of the ball. So he's an old guy, but he's also a new guy. And he's kind of an old guy as well, because he's been here before, been in Waco before. So
he and Caden Jenkins, that's a fun duo at cornerback, to have 2 guys like that with their kind of length and athletic profile. It's going to be very interesting, I think.
And I think we can talk about, as we get into this series, we're going to talk more and more about all the different positions. But so on a new guy that I'm going to go with, and it's kind of we'll see if it pans out, but Michael Trigg as a tight end, man, like I go back and catch myself watching his highlights from spring games. His basketball highlights from high school were absolutely nuts. Like, if you haven't YouTubed Michael Trigg basketball, go watch him and watch his highlights. And he's like 6'3", 6'4", tight end type that can just, he can take the roof off in a basketball game. So his athletic ability is there. He just never put it together on the field. He's been at USC, as I think he might have been a 5-star prospect at one point in high school. Then went to Ole Miss. Everybody thought he was going to, blow up the, college football as a tight end. Didn't ever do it last year. I think he was hurt a little bit, didn't play, but now he's at Baylor. And I think that you look at what Jake Spavital did in his offense at Cal last year, utilizing tight ends. I think, man, like the high end potential for him is so strong. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say I like him to change the face of Baylor's offense if he can get it going, because of the mismatches that he can create and the opportunities that he can open up for everyone else on the offense.
Right. And that's a guy who, if you go watch Ole Miss spring games the last 2 years, the 2 years before this year, I think he had 5 touchdowns in those 2 spring games. And it's just like him dominating, and that just never all came together, whether injury or just, it just not happening for him. It really is a frustrating situation, I'm sure, and one where when you watch his talent, you're like, how is this not all coming together yet? And then you watch him on the practice field at Baylor, and it's just like, whoa, when he catches the ball and like he turns up field. We watched Drake Dabney last year, and Drake had such a great year, and Drake's a very good positional guy, finds openings and is very strong. But when Trig catches the football and gets upfield, the burst is just very unique and not something you see from tight ends very often. Yeah, I mean, that's what made him a national prospect. Yeah.
Yeah, more like a receiver, and probably not even a big receiver, more like almost like a slot, kind of the in-between quicker guy that gets upfield. So, man, let's not give away everything. We have a lot to talk about over the next few weeks. I'm pumped to do it. We are – I don't know how many days. It's the 11th now, so 20 days. You'll be listening to this on a Monday morning, but we got 19 days until the football season starts. A big week of fall camp, a lot of stuff. We got soccer starting up. Volleyball's in fall camp right now. Just a lot going on, and we're going to be here to cover for all of you. Make sure that you check out the bundle for Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus. It's $17.99 a month. It's a great deal for everyone to hop onto, take advantage of it. If you were on the fence about either one, take advantage of them both for a month. Come to our message boards on Sikkim 365, get all of the behind the scenes stuff on Baylor Plus. And man, I don't think you'll be disappointed. I know Grayson does a great job with everything that we do. We bring a variety of analysis and everything. Baylor Plus does the behind the scenes stuff, the interviews. Man, it's just, I think the potential for this is so high. And the way that we can collaborate on things is going to make this really interesting and something that Baylor fans have never really seen. Now we have access to both, and Baylor has really taken us and said, "Hey, let's do it. Let's make it work." And we're thrilled to do it. And man, I don't know, Grayson, do you have anything else to add before we get back to this for the rest of the week?
I mean, it's just an exciting time right before football season for this to all come together and for us to kind of really just try to bring the Baylor community even more together before the football season starts. I think is going to be really fun. So, doing this podcast with you is going to be great. Just being able to talk Baylor football, provide any insight we can bring. We've been covering this, sport and all Baylor sports really for a long time. And we're just happy that we get to a platform to actually share that. So it's a great time. Very exciting, I think, for the Baylor fan base and for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Baylor family, we'll see you tomorrow. And make sure to hit up us on social media, on X, on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, on the message boards. Come chat, leave messages for us that we can answer here. We'll probably incorporate some of that stuff as we get going. And we look forward to interacting with you guys in the coming days, weeks, and months.